Hello and welcome back. Previously, we had seen how to build a HDI container based upon a CAP project inside the SAP HANA Cloud trial. And I want to pick up right there where we left off. We had fully deployed it and we had previewed the data. But what we hadn't really talked about is maybe the bigger picture of then how you access and administer that data, that container, independent of the technical users that come along with the container. And of course, that's the most natural way to start. You have your HDI container, and if I create a service in my application using CAP or XSO data, then it's automatically going to use those technical users to connect to the database. What about other scenarios where you want to expose other database users, external users, for reporting purposes or things like that? We get in a little bit more of a complex scenario there where we now have to get into larger scale HDI security administration to extend the security concepts and grant roles and access to other users. And this is often where people get kind of overwhelmed by HDI, perhaps. And I thought this would be an excellent opportunity to talk about HDI security administration in general. I'm going to do it in the context of HANA Cloud and on a HANA Cloud trial system, but much of the concepts that we're going to talk about now are really applicable to any HANA system where you're using the HANA Deployment Infrastructure, or HDI. So what I want to show you here is I'm logged into the Database Explorer, and I'm logged in as the super user, which now in HANA Cloud is DB Admin, not system as you might be familiar with it, but conceptually it's basically the same thing as a system user, this DB Admin user. So very powerful, lots of access. When I look at the catalog, for instance, this DB Admin user, they can see the schemas, and let's just go here and we'll look. And we actually see the generated schemas for our HDI container. I've got a couple of them on the system, but I can tell that that this is the generated schema for the one that I created previously with the little Cloud Application Program Model Bookshop example in it. And I can even come here and I can go to tables, and we could narrow the search, although luckily it's one of the first that comes up here, and we can see the Bookshop Books example. And this user is powerful enough, has enough authorization to see the metadata about the objects. But if we go to open the data, you'll see here it's actually not authorized to even view the data. So here you have this very powerful system user that can see most everything else in the system, but not inside of HDI containers, right? By contrast, if we wanted to see inside the HDI container, we could say add database, and we can say add at the HDI container level. And then we would come here, I've got a lot of stuff in my space, but let's come here and let's look at this demo. We'll add that HDI container. And now, looking at the HDI container, if I look at the list of tables, we will see the same list, yes, books. And now when I do open data, yes, I can see the data now. But that's because I'm connecting as those technical users that were automatically generated when we created the container instance itself by the service broker. And I can show you that if I'll just open a SQL console here, and I do a select current user from dummy and execute that. Then you see, yes, it's this technical user here. Basically, the username is the same as the schema. If we come back over here, we'll see that our actual physical schema name was this big long string here that began BEFFEA. Yeah, there you are, BEFFEA. and then a unique string to represent the user, because there can be multiple users per container. And then we have a underscore RT. And actually, if we looked here, we'd see for each of these, there's an underscore RT and an underscore DT. RT is the runtime user. DT is the design time user. The design time user is the one that has the ability to create, delete, and alter database artifacts. So when you do the CDS build and then you deploy the content into the database, or if you're working the Web IDE, when you do a build on your database module, it is this design time user that's being triggered by the HDI container to actually create the stuff or change the stuff in the database, the tables, the views, and things like that. Now, when you access it at runtime, either by viewing the container in the Database Explorer or by running a OData service or connecting the container from the service layer, that is going to be the runtime user, which can do things like select from tables and insert data into tables, update, but it can't alter the database artifacts themselves. This runtime user would not be able to say, do a drop table or alter table, add column. It's not going to be authorized. That way, all your database artifacts remain managed and only changeable and deployable at deploy time by using this separation of security. But all this means that, we have the ability to select, but what happens when we want to have a regular database user? What would happen if I wanted to give DB admin or another regular database user access to this container? I can't just go into the cockpit and start giving that access away, because even DB admin doesn't have it to give it away. And that's when we get into a little bit of the complexity of the HDI environment. There are a set of APIs, basically stored procedures, that we can call, even as DB admin, to then grant that access. But it's a little more complex than just logging in with any user and granting that access. That's what we want to take a look at now. And what I want to do is I want to bring up the online help here, because it's got a nice little diagram that explains the flow here. That the database user, this DB admin user, by default does not have any special HDI capabilities, right? So you might assume that, it being the system user, the all-powerful user that you get to start with, it really doesn't have any HDI administration or HDI container specific administration capabilities. What you can do with this DB admin user is create other users. So we're going to, in a moment here, we're going to create an overall HDI administrator, and then we're going to create HDI container group administrators that can access the individual containers. And this database administrator user is going to have enough access to at least grant access to the HDI administrator to make it an HDI administrator. So it itself is not an HDI administrator, but it has limited enough capabilities to create an HDI administrator. So this DB admin user, you can think of it as just a way to bootstrap getting started with HDI administration, but not perform it itself. Then once you have an HDI administrator user, they're going to be powerful enough to grant access to container group administrators, which are then going to be able to work at the container level or a group of containers if you don't want to manage each HDI container individually. We're going to keep things relatively simple here for our demo today. We're going to create the HDI administrators and the HDI group administrators. We're not going to create a bunch of individual containers administrators, because I only have one container that I'm working with. So we'll just flatten this part a little bit, but I will create an overall HDI administrator for my whole trial system, and then the group administrators. And this is one of the nice things about the new trial, is I'm not sharing it with anyone else. I've got a host system myself, so I really can do some of these sort of system admin, security kind of things to learn all the ins and outs of real HANA system usage, administration, and development, which I think is very nice. The other thing that I'll point out here is this is a pretty good guide. I'm just in the Deployment Infrastructure, or HDI reference document. And this is the version specifically to SAP HANA Cloud, because there are some differences in the layout of the APIs. Conceptually, this works the same in HANA as a service and HANA on-premise and HANA Express. But there are some differences in the individual API calls and the user administration that you have to be aware of. Things like the fact that it uses the DB admin user, and the other documentation will talk about using the system user to bootstrap it. So just make sure that you're using the right version for whatever you're targeting. But it's a very good step-by-step guide that walks you through here with all the code to call. So we're going to use this to basically walk through the setup process exactly as it says here. So we'll go ahead and start on that now. Okay, we basically want to follow along through this guide, and I'll walk through it with you and explain some of this as we go. So let me just put the guide here on one side, and I'll put the tooling on the other. That'll help us follow along. And what we're going to want to start is we're going to need a couple users. We're going to need this HDI administrator user and then our container group user. So let's go back over here to the cockpit, the HANA cockpit, and security and user management. And I'm just going to go here into user management. And we can go ahead and, oh, no. There we are. So it shows me the users that are here in the system already. Yes, we have our DB admin user. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and create a new user. We're going to call this one, let's just call this one HDI Admin. User group default. Don't need to change the validity or anything like that. Yeah, that's good. Go ahead and say that we can log in with a password. And actually, I don't want to force change it next login. I'm not sure it's going to let me override that. Okay, well, we'll change the password on the next login. Oh, there. Once I put it in there, then it lets me do that. Okay. So, set my password. Don't match. There we are. And, yeah. We'll do the rest of the setup of the authorization that it has using the scripts that were given here in the example. I just want to go ahead and get the users created so that they're ready for us to use. So we got an HDI admin, and let's go ahead and create our HDI group admin. Password. Don't force change. And we'll go ahead and save that. So we've got our two users. Actually, I could have just done HDI there. So created HDI admin, HDI group admin. Good. Good starting point. Now for the rest of this, let's go back over to the Database Explorer. And I want to start as DB admin. So let's open a SQL console as DB admin, and there, just give us a little more space there, just to make sure. Select current user from dummy. Interesting. Oh, I misspelled from. There we are. And we are running as DB admin. Very good. That's what I wanted. So first step is we want to create our HDI administrator. And already created the user. So now we can start here. You'll notice all these granting that we're doing. I can't just use the traditional SQL grant because, as I said, the users themselves that we're starting with, like the DB admin user, doesn't have the authorization themselves. So we're calling these APIs. Well, they're stored procedures. They have definer rights. That's the key here. So they're going to execute as the person who created the stored procedure, not the person or the user who's running the stored procedure. And that's how, as DB admin, who doesn't have the authorization itself, we can give it to another user. That's what we want to do here. But if you're not familiar with this concept, it might seem a little odd at first. What we have to do here is we have to create a local temporary table so we can put the parameters into that local temporary table. And what we want to do here, our username HDI admin. So we're going to say that we want to give the privilege to the user HDI admin, and and it's gonna, we're selecting from this built-in type default DI admin privileges, and that's gonna fill in the possible privileges. So we don't have to sit here and type in all the privileges. It's like a pre-built enumeration of all the privileges needed to be an HDI admin user. And then we're gonna call the container group API privileges with sysdi. We're gonna pass it this temporary table with all the parameter values, and that should do the trick. Then we'll drop the internal table, the temporary table. So let's go ahead, select the whole thing, and execute it. And we see the results here, which should be a bunch of granting. Yes, granting API privileges in the container group sysdi. sysdi, yeah, we see all this access being given to the HDI admin user. So we created that HDI admin user, but we didn't give it any roles, any security in the cockpit when we originally did that. It was sort of just a plain empty user, but now we've initialized this user, if you will, and now it's a powerful HDI admin user. Okay. So to have a look at that, let's go ahead and connect. And now we want to connect to a database. Tell you what, let's get the properties from here. Oh, this is what we want. Add database with a different user. That will connect us again to the same database instance, but we're going to connect with a different user. So now we want to connect as HDI admin user. Put in the password that I initialized, and there we are. So that we can tell the two apart, we'll go ahead and change the display name so it shows us that we're connected as that user. So now we got two different connections. If I come here to the other connection that's now as the HDI admin, let's see, still can't see any individual containers, but it's an overall HDI admin. Very, very limited authorization to, like, it can't see database diagnostic files. It's not a system admin user. It's just specifically an HDI admin user. I suppose we could now go back over to the cockpit and give it other normal roles if you wanted to turn this into a more overall well-rounded administrator user. But let's see, for instance, here, if we go to tables, and I think it's still not going to be able to, if we look here at the tables, yeah, we're very limited on what we can see, basically just the sysdi stuff. So although it's an HDI administrator overall, it too does not have this drastic control. It cannot see our individual container yet either. It's still somewhat a step apart, similar to the way DB Admin didn't have access to all the tables and all the containers initially. Even the HDI Administrator doesn't either. It's now able to bootstrap container admin users. Okay, and that's about all. So let's go ahead and open a SQL console here. I'll just do a select current user from dummy again, just to prove to you, yes, now I am logged on as the HDI admin user, not the DB admin user. And what we want to do here is we've already created our HDI administrator. Now we want to maintain the container groups, so we want to create a our HDI group user. Okay, so from this console, another set of API calls, which is essentially just a stored procedure that we are calling. So let's get a little more screen real estate again. And very similar process, creating a local table, local temporary table. Then we're going to insert into the privileges. And what we want to put in here is, let me scroll over. Okay, so we want to say what user we want, other container group admin. So we will say HDI, what do we call it? I'm glad I left this other one open. HDI Group Admin. HDI Group Admin. And default container group admin privileges. And we're going to call this on sysdi. But now the G needs to be replaced. The G here is the name of the container group. Actually, the other container group, we need to look up what our container group is. So give me just a second here. Let's see if we do this at the HDI level. I want to get a list of my container groups. All container groups. So come here, select star from all container groups. Table view, all container groups. Oh, not in my schema. This is in the, it told me that. I just didn't pay attention, did I? Here. And we only have the one container group name. It's broker CG. Let's go ahead and copy that. So this G placeholder in the documentation can be changed here to broker CG. And let's see, is there anything else we need to change? No, I don't see anything else we need to change. So we will now go ahead and select this and run it. All right. And we got a insufficient privilege. So let's have a look. And I see I made a slight mistake here. I had gone to the wrong section. I had jumped down here to an API. I'd grabbed the wrong one to grant an HDI container administrator privilege to a different user, but done by the group container administrator to begin with. And what I should have done, I got a little out of place in the guide. Like I said, it works if you follow along. You got to be careful that you're going through the right level here. As the HDI administrator, I should have used this section of the documentation to grant an SAP HDI container group administrator privileges to another user. It sounds similar here, but it's an important distinction that I should have paid a little closer attention to. It's a slightly different set of APIs, and this is good actually that I made this mistake, because it'll show you the difference here. Because now, instead of calling sysdi and the group itself and the grant container group API privileges that belongs to that group, I'm going to call the global one, if you will, the sysdi, which as the HDI admin user, only that user would have privileges. And what we have to do here is we have to pass the group in as a name. So now this is broker CG. Otherwise, this is essentially the same. Need to go ahead and put in the username, HDI Group Admin, and everything else. Yeah, everything else looks good. Okay, so let's see here. That's going to be okay. Tell you what, let's go ahead and do a drop so it's clear from the previous, and let's go ahead and run this new command, the right one now, not the one with the group name in it, but if you will, the global API passing the target group in as a parameter. And if we go ahead and run that, this time it worked. Okay, so if I follow my own advice and go through the flow of the instructions in the right order, then everything works fine. So now we've got a group admin, and let's go ahead and test this. So let's do another login, and with a different user. This time we'll do HDI Group Admin. And now if I switch over here to the Group Admin, oh, did I probably messed up the credentials, so let's try that again. All right. HDI Group Admin. There we are. One more try. This time, much better. I didn't type up the password. And what we should see here is now we're finally at a level where we can see our HDI containers. So I can come in here and I can see the details of this particular HDI container. I could also come into the catalog, and now if I look at the tables, no, I can't see the individual tables. So I'm only down to the level that I can see the HDI containers, but I'm actually not down to the level yet where I can see the contents of the HDI containers and looks things, just the individual containers in there. So the next step is, because we're going to compress this down a little bit, I don't need to create an admin for each container. I'm going to go ahead and kind of give that authorization. Also, we're going to try to give it to this user so we can simplify the process just a little bit here. So we're down to this group administrator level, and let's go ahead and just prove to you, select current user from dummy. Yes, HDI Group Admin. Let's see if we can compress this down now that we're a group admin, and see if we can grant container administration privileges to a particular an individual container administrator privileges to a certain user. And once again, another block of code here, same sort of APIs. Let's just go ahead and come here, and I want just a little bit more screen room. So, same sort of thing here, insert into privileges, new container. Here, let's go ahead and full screen here. New container admin, and we're going to cheat a little rather than create a whole nother user. For the purposes of what I'm doing, we're going to compress this down and see if we can make our HDI Group admin also our container admin in this case. And we are going to do this on the group level. And I should have kept my groups open, or should have kept that previous. Oh, there it is. Broker_CG. So we're going to call this on broker_CG. And we're going to give it to container. Actually, this is the container. Oh, it's not going to let me. I'd really rather not type this whole thing in, but it's not going to let me. It's not going to let me do that. Let me see if I can get that somewhere else. I know the value I want. It just won't let me. It just won't let me cut and paste it here, and I really don't want to type all that in. All right. Select star from M containers. SysDI. So once again, we will use the system views here. Is that not the right one? All right. I was gonna be fancy and try to do it from memory there. Let's go right back. So let's go to our SDI. Oh, M all containers. Yes, all containers. Oh, and we're not privileged. It's very secure, isn't it? All this so I don't have to type something in. Just so, there we are. There. Now I've done a copy, so I don't have to type it in. Definitely going to leave that window available in case I need that again. So what we're saying now is we want to give container-specific admin privileges to our HDI group admin for this group, the broker CG group, to this particular container. So let's go ahead and run this. All right, that is done. So now this user, HDI group admin, is also a container-specific admin. And I believe now, when I come over here to HDI containers, and we were able to view the HDI containers before, but now when I come to tables, I still cannot see. Do a refresh. No, surprised that I still cannot see that data, but I should be able to give access to other users as well. And once again, I can kind of compress this down. If I didn't want to create, say, a reporting user, I can give the individual access rights, because I'm now an admin to both the group and the container itself. But what I really want is a user that can, for instance, select from the container. So now what I want to do is I want to say I want to grant HDI container not administrative privileges, but just regular privileges, maintaining. So I want to maintain the HDI container now, and let's say grant access to the HDI container. Grant access to an HDI container schema. That's really what I want now. So we'll come here at this level, and once again, let's come here. Let's put it in. And what we're saying is we're just going to give select access now. And for the purpose of testing real quick, let's just do this. HDI Group Admin. And this is our broker. Although this is now at the container level. So what we can say here is we take the container name, so we replace C, that's our container. We're going to grant container schema privileges to of select privileges to the HDI Group Admin. So let's go ahead and run this. And now, yes, we have granted select. So if I refresh and I come to tables. Oh, I don't know why I'm not seeing tables. How stupid of me. I had a filter on the schemas. Now I can see the table, and yes, now I can see inside the container schema itself, and there's our books table. But now, since we have the select for this user, now I can do an open data, and fingers crossed, there we are. Now we're able to read the data as well. So not a container technical user that was generated by the creation of the container, but a regular database user. Now we built it up and it was an admin user, but the next step is let's just create a regular database user like a reporting user would be, and we'll give them this access as well. All right, so now let's go back over to the cockpit. Let's create a whole new user here. Go back one, and let's create a new user, and let's call it CAP reporting, and password. Oh, no, I don't want it to fill in. Force a change. Don't give it any other access. It's just going to be a very bare bones user. We'll go ahead and save that. Okay, so I got this user CAP reporting. Now let's go back over to the Database Explorer, and I'll come back here to my console, and this is where I'm an HDI Group Admin. And now what I want to do is, take this. I don't need to replace it. We want to take our CAP reporting, and we want to make it a container select user. CAP reporting. Okay? And if this works right, then we should have this new user that only has access to select from the HDI container. So let's go ahead and run that. Yes, it is granted access to the CAP reporting user to select, and only from our HDI container, and only this one HDI container. So let's do another log on just to test it. So we'll log in with a different user. We'll call this one CAP reporting. If we look at what CAP reporting can see, we go into tables, defaults schema, and all we can see is dummy, and we can see our one container. That's it. Now let's test that access. Let's make sure that I can come here and go to books. I can see the metadata. If I do open data, yes, I can see the data. If I try to generate an insert statement, though, let's just see what happens. Yeah, I'm going to have to fill in. This is going to make me fill in all this data. Let's see. Is that going to be enough to, I don't know, 12. See if that's enough to make it just really freak out or not. I should get, I don't know. Oh, because it wants timestamps. All right, I just want to do a quick little test, but comma back. There we are. Now let's run this. And I get an insufficient privilege because we only gave it select. Now, of course, we could go back and give it insert privileges, but in this case, I want a reporting user. So I want it to only be able to read the data, which is exactly what I have now with this CAP reporting user. That's precisely what I was going for. And now, just to demonstrate that we can now access our container from completely outside of HANA Cloud and the cloud platform here, we go ahead and bring up another tool, just an external SQL editor tool called Squirrel SQL that supports a variety of different databases. And where did it go? There it is. Had a little problems getting it to come up there. But I've gone ahead and created an entry for my HANA Cloud. See, I've just put in the URL of my HANA Cloud instance, and I'm going to connect as the CAP reporting user that we just created. Let's say OK. Well, let's go ahead and connect. And what you'll see here is we're connecting to HANA Cloud from this client running on my desktop. But I'm connected as that CAP reporting user, and what I can see here is I can see my container. I can see the tables in my container. There they are: books, authors, genres. There's books, and if we want, what we can do here is SQL. Copy. Select star from. There we are. And if I run that. Need to put I didn't put a default schema name on there, did I? Oh, let's grab the whole thing here. Let's copy that. Now let's run it. There we are. Now we're reading our data, and we're reading it just fine from this external SQL client here. So we've seen all the way how we can take our HDI container that when it was initially created, it was only accessible to the technical users that were generated, but we saw how we could create an overall HDI administrator user for our host system, how we could create a group administrator user, and even give that group administrator user access to our individual containers. And then we created a little reporting user, just a regular database user. We were able to use our newly created container admin user to grant access for this other database user to be able to select from our container. And now we've seen how with HANA Cloud we're accessing it from my desktop with a third-party reporting tool. It has nothing to do with SAP or HANA, and I'm able with this user to access the data in my container. I know a lot of concepts, a lot of layers to the security. You can imagine if you're trying to administer many containers and you want a granular level control, group control, as well as be able to create individual user access. That's really the full range of what we can do here with the HDI security approaches. It may feel very overwhelming at first, particularly if you're doing a simple example like this where you have a single container in your system. But you can imagine if you have many different containers, many different departments in your company, and you want this level of control over the access, that's exactly what HDI gives you. And yes, there's a learning curve to all these different layers and setting up the various admin users, but the payoff in the long run is a much more secure system and the ability to control it at different levels of that security. So I hope you've enjoyed this in-depth look at HDI administration and HDI security, and hopefully it's demystified some of these things, because I think many people look at it and they only see the container and the technical users, and they assume that's the limit, but really we can open up our container and make it accessible in so many different ways as we've seen here today.